It's Thursday, September 10. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Carol Francis. As at Thursday morning, the island's death toll stands at 38. This after 2 more people died from COVID-19. The deceased are an 8-year-old woman and a 12-year-old boy, who both had underlying health conditions and are both from Manchester. At the same time, the country has also recorded 140 new positives on Wednesday. The newly confirmed cases bring the total cases on record for the island to 3,437. In the meantime, 27 people have recovered from the virus. Of the newly confirmed cases, there are 66 females and 48 males, with ages ranging from 4 months to 93 years. The 47 cases were recorded in Kingston and St. Andrew, 14 in Portland, 13 in Manchester, 12 in St. James and Clarendon, respectively, 10 in St. Catherine, while St. Thomas, St. Anne, and Hannibal each reported 2 cases. All 114 cases are under investigation. 26 moderately ill patients and 8 critically ill patients are among the 2,302 active cases now under observation in Jamaica. Jamaica's response to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic has once again been boosted, this time by a donation of 20,000 medical masks and 300 coveralls. The donation was made recently by Henna Fifth Construction Company Limited to support the most at-risk frontline health workers in the fight against COVID-19. Local representative for Henna Fifth, Patrick Wong, says the company is happy for the opportunity to be able to assist the country tackle the challenges of COVID-19. Henna Fifth Construction Company is the contractor on the $8.4 billion 754-unit Ryan Park housing development in Rose Hall, St. James. It is being undertaken by the Housing Agency of Jamaica, HAJ, under a joint venture partnership. The 96-acre development is intended to respond to the housing needs of low to middle income earners in St. James, as well as persons employed to the attractions and accommodation sectors. The biggest blow to the Jamaican economy this year has undoubtedly been the COVID-19 pandemic. On Wednesday, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, gave more evidence to this when they reported that the economy contracted by an estimated 18% for the April to June quarter relative to the corresponding period last year. We get the details in this next report.
In his quarterly report on Wednesday, Director General Dr. Wayne Henry was unequivocal. He laid blame for the outturn at the feet of the novel coronavirus and measures implemented to contain its spread.
The preliminary data presented on performance for the April to June 2020 quarter indicate that the economy has continued to be negatively impacted by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and measures implemented to mitigate its spread. The most significant restrictions occurred within the review quarter, including the closure of Jamaica's borders to incoming passengers for over 2 of the 3 months, and the implementation of work from home and other physical distancing measures. For the upcoming quarter, July to September 2020, it is projected that the economy will continue to contract within a range of 8 to 10%.
Dr. Henry also highlighted the decline in critical sectors such as goods production, agriculture, and the services industry.
The goods producing industry contracted by an estimated 7%, with all industries registering a decline. This performance largely reflected the impact of the temporary closure of the Gisco Alpart alumina refinery, drought conditions which adversely affected agriculture production, and measures implemented to contain the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Agriculture. Output of the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry was estimated to have declined by 8.5%. The outturn of the industry largely reflected the impact of drought conditions experienced across the island.
The foreign exchange brought in by tourism is typically a lifeline to the economy. However, that was a major casualty of COVID-19 containment measures. The drastic fall-off in tourist arrivals were occasioned by travel restrictions owing to the pandemic.
Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry contracted by an estimated 87.5%, reflecting a sharp decline in visitor arrivals and the number of persons utilizing restaurant services. Among the measures implemented to manage the spread of the COVID-19 was the closure of borders to passenger traffic for 2 of the 3 months during the quarter. This led to a significant fall-off in stopover arrivals by 98.9% to 7,188 visitors. Total visitor expenditure at US $16.2 million was 98.1% lower than that recorded in the corresponding period of 2019.
Overall, the 6-month outturn for January to June is for the economy to contract by an estimated 10.2% and by between 8 and 10% for the July to September 2020 quarter, largely due to the impact of COVID-19. Dr. Henry said the PIOJ estimates that the 2020-2021 fiscal year will contract within the range of 8 to 10%. The economic forecast remains gloomy, with gross domestic product (GDP) levels not anticipated to recover until 2 years after the pandemic. For the news on PBCJ, I'm Gabrielle Thompson.
The government of Jamaica temporarily closed educational institutions in an attempt to contain the spread of the coronavirus. The physical closure of schools forced institutions to switch to virtual and remote learning platforms. But what is the impact of this new paradigm on the student body? The preliminary findings of a survey on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on Jamaican children and the capacity to respond were released by UNICEF and CAPRI. Marlon Samuels has more on the findings.
The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted thousands of students across Jamaica. It led to the closure of nearly all schools, colleges, and universities. This resulted in interruptions in students' learning, disruptions in internal school assessments, and the cancellation of PEP, and the postponement or cancellation of other exams. The solution put forward was homeschooling and online classes. The preliminary findings of a survey done between June 23 and July 13 on the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on Jamaican children and the capacity to respond was released by UNICEF and CAPRI on September 8. The findings show that the lockdown of schools has resulted in unequal interruption in students' learning and socialization. 80% of those surveyed said they had access to internet and a device. Most said they had access on their mobile phones. However, 34% did not have exclusive access to a device for educational purposes. The research shows that many families do not want to send their children to school for fear they get COVID-19. Many families are also faced with reduced incomes. 46% of those surveyed said they had lost their source of income. 44% are experiencing food shortages and are now eating fewer and smaller meals. Despite these fears, lack of income and other resources, more than 30% of those surveyed are not satisfied with distance learning. Many of the children have little supervision while online. They are suffering emotionally. They complain of being bored, frustrated, anxious, sad, and fearful. The recommendation is for schools to reopen with strict biosecure protocols to keep children safe, nutritional support to be given to children, so too universal internet access, as well as psychosocial support services. For the news on PBCJ, I'm Marlon Samuels.
And local schools were closed physically on March 13, 3 days after the first case of COVID-19 was reported on the island. Schools are scheduled to reopen on October 5, but the date remains tentative. With community transmission of the pandemic now confirmed, there are concerns of risk to the student population. Acting Chief Education Officer Dr. Kassan Troop addressed the approaches to the new school term at a webinar hosted by the Education Ministry on Wednesday.
In the curriculum schedule as well, we would have communicated previously about the rotational model. So if it is that we can resume the in-person for the most part in October, then you will see some of our schools operating a rotational model, which means that there will be days that our students and teachers will be physically in the physical school, while others are working remotely from home or from a location that will allow them to log on to the internet or any other devices that will facilitate the virtual or computer-aided learning. And then you will have a flip. So they will be out like for 2 days this week, and they will come back into the physical space for 3 days the following week. That's the A plan, as I have said earlier. But of course, the B plan could see us not being able to do that. We are relying on the information and the guidance from the Ministry of Health. Another model that we have approved is the online, which is the full version of online, and that of course will address the older students. So we would have given our permission for our high schools to migrate the learning programs for our sixth form students, our grades 12 and 13 students, to the virtual space. And of course, a number of our tertiary institutions have already started to do that. And the Ministry of Education has supported those institutions, our public-private tertiary institutions, to move their programs into the virtual space.
Dr. Troop says the ministry continues to be guided by health officials, and their default position is a wait-and-see one.
Because we may not be able to physically gather in October, we are awaiting the directive from the Ministry of Health. As soon as the Cabinet is able to reconvene, they will deliberate on this matter, and the Ministry of Education will be guided as to what can be facilitated, and we will definitely communicate with our key stakeholders. So we are conscious that we are in a health crisis. We are aware of what is happening in the sector, and so we have to adjust. So right now I can tell you that we have commenced a series of consultations with our telecom providers, with our providers of computers and tablets and so forth. Those are the distributors and our suppliers. We are talking with our educational service content providers, those persons who have content developed against our curriculum, the worksheets, the quizzes, the tests that are aligned to the PEP and to the NSC and to CXE. We have started to have dialogue with them, because more now than ever, if we have to rely on the virtual computer-aided approaches, we have to give access to content so the learning engagements can be supported on the ground.
The Industrial Disputes Tribunal, the IDT, on Wednesday ordered state oil company Petrojam to pay former general manager Howard Mollison $15.8 million in compensation for unfair dismissal. Mr. Mollison was fired 4 years ago. Mr. Mollison, who was employed on a 2-year contract, received a letter on Wednesday, July 20, 2016, informing him that he was dismissed with immediate effect. In its defense, Petrojam had argued that Mr. Mollison was terminated after the return of the previous general manager, who had been seconded to the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica. In the end, however, the tribunal ruled that Mr. Mollison's service was not terminated in accordance with the terms of his contract. A teenager was one of 2 persons killed by lightning on Wednesday, September 9. Dead are 14-year-old Ricardo Fisher of Kensham District in St. Elizabeth and 30-year-old Sheldon Kane, a farm of Mineral Heights in Clarendon. Reports from the Balaclava police are that about 4:25 in the afternoon, both persons were picking pears when they were struck by lightning. They were both pronounced dead at hospital. Motorists will get some relief at the pump this week as prices dip for the 2nd week running. Gabriel Thompson gives us the details on that and other market movements in this edition of the Business Report.
According to the latest ex-refinery costs from Petrojam, motorists should see a decrease at the pumps in the prices of gasoline and diesel effective Thursday, September 10. Following a decrease of $3 each, 87 and 90 octane gasoline will be sold for $116.01 and $118.84 per liter. Automotive diesel fuel will be sold for $112.41 per liter, following a decrease of $3.06, while ultra-low sulfur diesel is also down by $3.06 and will be sold for $115.22 per litre. Meanwhile, kerosene decreased in price by $3 and will be sold for $89.65 per litre. Propane liquid petroleum will be sold for $47.64 per litre, down by $2.03, and butane liquid petroleum will be sold for $52.15 per litre after a decrease of 64 cents. Marketing companies and retailers will add their respective markup to these prices. In Wednesday's trading session, the JSE Combined Index declined by 1,990 points to close at under 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 72 stocks, of which 30 advanced, 35 declined, and 7 traded firm. The Junior Market Index declined by 17 points to close at under 3,000 units. Stocks advanced for AMG Packaging and Paper Company, Burita Investments Limited, and Berger Paints Jamaica. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica, Blue Par Group Limited, and Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited. Trading firm were Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited, Knutsford Express Services Limited, and Lumber Depot Limited. Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited was the volume leader with just over 2 million units, followed by Wigton Wind Farm Limited ordinary shares with 1.3 million units, and Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial with under 700,000 units. Now for the foreign exchange. The US dollar on Wednesday, September 9, ended trading at $145.30. The Canadian dollar sold for an average $111.19. The pound sterling traded for $189.64, and the euro ended trading at $172.35. Oil prices dipped on Thursday after data showed U.S. crude stockpiles rose last week, and the U.S. Energy Information Administration downgraded its oil demand outlook, although the Brent benchmark stayed above $40 a barrel. Brent crude futures fell 53 cents to settle at $40.26 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude futures dipped 61 cents to $37.44 a barrel. And that's it for the business report on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson.
In regional news, healthcare workers and the elderly will be among the first to access a COVID-19 vaccine if and when it is developed. This from that country's health minister, who believes a vaccine may not be produced before 2021. In the interim, he is urging citizens to adhere to the public health guidelines, noting a recent issue of a party on a private compound. Sunil Lala has more.
Workers will be government's first priority when a vaccine for the COVID-19 virus is finally developed. But Minister Terence Dialsingh is assuring that the vulnerable groups such as the elderly will also be one of the first groups to receive the vaccine. He confirms that TNT has signed on with PAHO, which is investing in a portfolio of vaccines in trial. When one is developed, the minister says TNT has an order of 400,000 doses of vaccines, but notes that not all will be delivered at the same time.
What we have signed up for with COVAX is that we will get in the first instance 20% of what we need. So 20% of roughly 400,000 is 80,000. That will help us in the first instance, in the first few months of the vaccination process, to vaccinate hopefully every single healthcare worker. There are about 17,000.
But Mr. Dialsingh does not expect a vaccine to be developed until next year, during which time he says citizens' behavior will determine the increase in cases. He notes a recent video on social media of a party on private property, behavior which he believes could leave the parallel healthcare system in shambles. Mr. Dialsingh says the COVID-19 regulations only involve public spaces, but he says he will have to speak to the Attorney General to see if anything can be done to stop this sort of behavior on private property.
I have been imploring and sometimes literally begging people not to host these type of events in your private properties. Now, I will have to talk to the Attorney General to see if it is possible, because these are serious constitutional areas we are going into now. People have a right to privacy. It's in the Constitution.
The minister, meanwhile, is making an appeal to businesses to ensure that their employees do not show up for work while they are ill.
And asking businesses and employers to do what is right, both for your employees, what is the best interest of your employees, because you want a healthy workforce. You want a workforce that is healthy and happy, that is well protected. A lot of this onus now rests on you.
The minister adds that he also witnessed persons flouting regulations at a local restaurant where a person was seen dining, and is again urging all citizens to obey the regulations. Sonolala, TTT News.
In Barbados, the special envoy to the Prime Minister on Investment and Financial Services says unemployment payments may be extended. We have more in this report.
The time employees are expected to wait before they can seek severance payments could be further extended. Special Envoy to the Prime Minister on Investment and Financial Services, Professor Avinash Prasad, told the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association's third quarterly general meeting that consideration was also being given to lengthening the unemployment payment period. He explained that the proposed Barbados Economic and Sustainable Transformation Program, which is being designed to get employees in the tourism sector back to work, was still being developed, and if it is not ready before most of the severance payments are triggered, then the change may be necessary.
We are not looking to extend the layoff eligibility for severance, which has currently already been extended from 13 weeks to 22 weeks. We may amend the legislation to extend it by a week or so if there are logistical issues around getting this program in place at the right time. We are going to extend unemployment benefit, which is currently at 26 weeks, and probably going to extend that for a period of time. We're still working out how long that is. But that's just to make sure that anyone is not, through the period of getting people re-engaged, no one's falling through the cracks and their unemployment benefit has run out and they've not started their job again yet. So we are seriously thinking of extending unemployment benefit. We're not really thinking of extending severance by the eligibility period by any significant length of time, but we may end up having to do that by a week or two.
Trouble is brewing between the Clery Minibus Association in St. Lucia and members over the smooth running of the organization. At least 2 members distanced themselves from the organization after drivers were placed on a rotation system. Cecile Actil reports.
The Clery Minibus Association is currently facing 2 major challenges. One involves compensation due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the issue of piracy. Following safety and health protocols established by authorities as a result of the pandemic, minibus operators allow 7 to 9 passengers per trip. Since the reopening of school, the association placed minibus operators on rotation. According to the Clery Minibus Association President Aaron King, the shift system doesn't make a difference.
Almost all drivers would like to see they get compensated for the COVID because we were carrying 7 passengers, 9 passengers, and look now we're carrying 10. So definitely our earnings went down to by about 80%. So we would like to be compensated for that. Well, basically it's the same thing. We have about 20, we have about 43 members, 20 each working in each shift. So everybody gets a little piece of the pie during the thing, but it was not anything to talk about.
Aaron King said to add insult to injury, the issue of piracy is stifling members from making an honest living.
We have some guys who refuse to follow rotation, and that's a problem. We have been to the government on several occasions, concerning that, we sent letters, everything. These guys continue to just do what they want. That's the problem. Okay, if you want, you can even go by dealers to see they come and pick up, because while they're waiting about a whole 2 hours or hour for a load, they have fellas by dealers just going, picking up and down, just going up the road, just picking up people by dealers, preventing people from going to the bus stand. That's our biggest problem. And we keep going to the government, writing to them all the time for that. Ministry of Transport is the governing body. They work the rules and regulations. We can't enforce no laws. They're the ones who enforce the law. So if we write to them and they can't do nothing, we just have to wait and see what they're doing. That's our problem.
At least 2 drivers have disassociated themselves with the association after the organization was accused of running ineffectively.
You can identify me as the first bus driver who disassociated himself from a minibus association because an association president write a letter and say, do not renew my repayment because I've disassociated myself. I tell him, but it's because of you I disassociated myself. I don't want to be in the association as long as you are president. You know this where this went to? You know this went to judicial review. You know what it cost me? And the ministry complicit in this. Certain individuals actually, but then again, you know, life goes on. I'm still here, and I go in there, and I'm certain you cannot tell me I'm talking any nonsense. This is about an entire industry. Move this industry to the next business level so that the operators can benefit. You know, and then you won't hear nothing about rotation. You won't hear nothing about nothing like that.
The association said 7 months after the COVID-19 pandemic, members are unable to generate funds to pay their loans and vehicle parts expenses. Minibus drivers in July were required no more than 10 passengers during their operations to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Cecil Actil, NBC Prime.
In sports, Confederation of North America, Central American, Caribbean Football Association, CONCACAF President Victor Montagliani says having an invitee to the 2021 version of the Gold Cup should be seen as an asset rather than a liability. In announcing sweeping changes to the Confederation's marquee national tournament, the CONCACAF boss revealed that Asian champions Qatar will be the guest team at a robust and expanded version of the biennial showpiece. In addition to a guest team returning to the championships for the first time since 2005, Montagliani also unveiled plans for a first ever draw of the 16-nation competition. And that's our package. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same place for more news and sports right here on PBCJ, the People's Station.